Welcome to the channel.
You know that feeling when everything in your life seems perfect, and you just assume it'll stay that way? That was me, Tim Miron. I had a thriving IT consulting business, a beautiful home in a quiet Midwestern town, and what I thought was a rock-solid marriage to my wife, Becky. We had been together for 10 years, married for 8. I never thought I'd be the guy writing a story like this, but here we are. It all started on an ordinary Tuesday evening. Becky was making dinner, her famous lemon garlic chicken. I had just wrapped up a big project and was looking forward to a relaxing night. But then, she turned to me, wiped her hands on a kitchen towel, and dropped the bombshell. "I want a divorce." Just like that. No warning. No build-up. Like she was announcing that she was changing the brand of laundry detergent we used. I laughed at first, thinking she was joking. Funny. "Now, can you pass me the—" "I'm serious, Tim." She cut me off, her face completely blank. That's when my stomach sank. "Why?" It was all I could say. She sighed, like I was a child asking why the sky was blue. I don't love you anymore. I've changed. We both have." I wasn't buying it. Something felt off. Becky wasn't emotional, wasn't sad or angry. Just cold. "When did you decide this?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. She hesitated. A while ago. And she hadn't said a word? I stared at her, my mind racing. Becky had always been a little high maintenance, a little entitled thanks to her father, Ronald Maines, the man who owned the biggest bank in town and pretty much controlled half of it. But I loved her. I thought we were happy. She wasn't done. "I think it would be best if we kept this civil, Tim. There's no need to make it messy." Messy? What did she mean by messy? That's when it hit me. She had a plan. And if Becky had a plan, that meant her father was involved. I felt like I had been hit by a truck. "Is there someone else?" I forced the words out, already dreading the answer. She blinked. "No, this isn't about another person. I just need to find myself again." Lies. I had spent enough years in IT to know when someone was trying to hide something. My gut told me there was more to this than Becky was letting on. I took a deep breath. "All right, if that's what you want." Her lips pressed together. She wasn't expecting me to accept it so quickly. She wanted me to beg, to cry, to make it easier for her to paint me as the bad guy. But I wasn't going to give her that satisfaction. "Good," she said. "I'll have my lawyer send over the papers." Her lawyer. So she had this lined up already. I clenched my jaw, my mind shifting from confusion to clarity. This wasn't just Becky suddenly falling out of love. This was orchestrated. And if there was one thing I knew about Ronald Maines, it was that he never made a move unless he was sure he would win. They wanted to destroy me, and I wasn't going to let them. I didn't sleep that night. I just lay there, staring at the ceiling, replaying every moment of my marriage, looking for clues I had missed. Becky had been distant for months. Sure, but I thought it was just stress from work. She worked at her father's bank, and even though she had a cushy position thanks to nepotism, she always complained about how exhausting it was. Now I knew better. By morning, my brain was running on fumes, but I had made a decision. I wasn't going to just roll over and let them ruin me. First thing I did was call my lawyer, Steve. He had handled a few business contracts for me in the past, but I never thought I'd need him for something like this. "Tim, what's going on?" he asked when he picked up. "I need to know how bad a divorce could get for me," I said, skipping the pleasantries. There was a pause. Is Becky filing?" "She says she is." Steve sighed. "All right, first thing, don't sign anything until we go over it. And second, do you think this is going to be a friendly divorce?" I almost laughed. "No. Her dad is involved." That changed Steve's tone immediately. "Then we need to be careful." We set up a meeting for that afternoon, but before I could even get off the phone, I got a text from Becky. "We need to talk about the house. Can you come home early?" I stared at the screen. The house. Of course. We had bought it together, but the mortgage was in my name. I had a bad feeling about this. The real betrayal. I got home around 4 p.m. Becky was already there, sitting at the kitchen table with a folder in front of her. "Tim," she started, putting on this soft, fake sympathetic voice. "I think it's best if I keep the house." I scoffed. "You think it's best?" She sighed like I was being difficult. "I've already spoken to my dad's real estate team. They can take care of everything. If you just sign these papers, we can transfer the deed, and I'll refinance in my name." I picked up the papers, skimming through them. My hands tightened as I reached the bottom. Not only was she trying to take the house, but she wanted me to cover part of the refinancing costs. I tossed the papers back onto the table. "No." Her eyes flashed. "Tim, let's not make this harder than it has to be." I leaned forward. "Becky, how stupid do you think I am? You're not doing this alone. Your dad is pulling the strings. What's really going on here?" She pressed her lips together, then gave a small shrug. "I just think it's the most practical option." "Lies. Who is he?" I asked, my voice low. She froze for just a second. "What?" "The guy you're leaving me for." Her face hardened. "There's no one else." I stared at her, and for the first time in years, I realized I didn't recognize the woman in front of me. "All right," I said, grabbing my keys. "I'll let my lawyer look at these, but I'm not signing anything today." Becky rolled her eyes. "Tim, don't be dramatic." I walked out before she could finish. The first clue. That night, I couldn't stop thinking about it. The way she reacted when I asked about another man. The rush to take the house. The weird detachment in her voice. So I did something I never thought I'd have to do. I went looking for proof. Becky and I shared a desktop computer in the home office. She mainly used her laptop, but sometimes she forgot to log out of accounts when she used the desktop. I sat down, pulled up her email, and typed in a search, "divorce." Hundreds of results. Most of them were legal consultations, financial advisors. But then, there was one that caught my eye. A reservation confirmation at a luxury hotel. For 2 guests. 2 nights ago. And the payment? Covered by none other than Ronald Maines. My blood ran cold. This wasn't just Becky leaving me. This was a full-blown setup. And now I had my first piece of evidence. I sat there, staring at the screen, my pulse pounding in my ears. 2 nights ago, a luxury hotel, paid for by her father. She had been sleeping with someone. I should have been devastated. But honestly, I just felt angry. Not just at Becky, but at myself for not seeing it sooner. She hadn't even bothered to cover her tracks. She thought I was too stupid or too weak to fight back. Fine. If she wanted to play dirty, I could too. Following the trail. First, I took a screenshot of the hotel reservation and emailed it to myself. Then I went deeper. Her emails had nothing else useful, but then I checked her calendar. She always used the same password for everything, and sure enough, I got in. She had a meeting marked down for tomorrow morning. Breakfast 9 a.m. at the Fairway Cafe. No details, no name. Just that. I had a hunch. The Fairway Cafe was a little spot near the golf course. A place her father frequented for business deals. Becky hated golf. She only went there when her dad told her to. Which meant this wasn't just breakfast. This was a meeting. With him. The observation. I got up early the next morning, parked my car across from the cafe, and waited. At exactly 8:55 a.m., Becky pulled up in her silver SUV. She stepped out, dressed in one of those business casual outfits she only wore when she wanted to impress someone. Not even 2 minutes later, another car rolled up. A black BMW. And out stepped Greg Larson. I almost laughed. Of course it was him. Greg was a senior manager at Becky's dad's bank. Tall, good-looking, and exactly the type of guy Ronald Maines would want his daughter with. Wealthy, connected, and spineless enough to do whatever he was told. I had never liked him, but I never thought Becky would actually go for someone so boring. I snapped a few pictures from my phone as they greeted each other. She smiled up at him, touching his arm like they had some inside joke. He leaned in close, whispering something that made her laugh. And just like that, I had my confirmation. This wasn't just an affair. This was a takeover. The pieces come together. Becky wasn't just leaving me. Her father was setting her up with Greg and making sure I walked away with nothing. The house, my business, everything. I clenched my jaw, forcing myself to stay calm. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. No, if I wanted to win, I needed to be smart. They thought I was in the dark. They thought I was just some clueless husband who would roll over and accept whatever Becky and her father handed me. But now I had the upper hand. I sat in my car, gripping the steering wheel, watching Becky and Greg sip their overpriced lattes like they didn't just shatter my life. But I wasn't going to do something stupid like storm in there and cause a scene. No, I needed to be smarter than that. They thought they were in control. That was my advantage. So, I drove home, cleared my head, and planned my next move. The calm before the storm. That night, Becky came home late, which was becoming a habit. She walked into the house like nothing had changed, like she hadn't spent the morning giggling over breakfast with her new boyfriend. I played along. "Hey!" I greeted her from the couch, keeping my voice normal. "Hey!" she replied, setting her purse down. "Long day?" I asked. She hesitated. "Yeah, just work stuff." Liar. She sat beside me, acting casual, scrolling through her phone. I watched her out of the corner of my eye. Did she even feel guilty? Did she even care that she was lying straight to my face? I forced a smile. "So, when do you want to start splitting things up? I figured we should go over it together before lawyers get involved." Becky's head snapped up, caught off guard. She had expected a fight, maybe some begging. But I was giving her none of that. Yeah," she said slowly. "That's a good idea. I think we should keep things fair. Fair, right?" I nodded, pretending to be agreeable. "Cool. We'll figure it out." And just like that, I saw her relax. She thought she had me exactly where she wanted me. Perfect. Laying the trap. The next morning, I met with Steve, my lawyer. "She's cheating," I told him, handing over the pictures I took of Becky and Greg at the cafe. "And I'm pretty sure her father is involved." Steve leaned back in his chair, flipping through the evidence. "You don't have a photo of them doing anything physical. This proves they were meeting, but not necessarily that they're having an affair." I clenched my jaw. "Come on, Steve. We both know what's going on here." He nodded. "Oh, I believe you. But in court, it's not proof." I exhaled sharply. "Then we need proof." Steve tapped his fingers on the desk, thinking. "Okay, here's what we do. We hold off on responding to the divorce papers. Act like you're cooperating. Keep her comfortable. Meanwhile, we gather more evidence. If we can prove adultery, you'll have leverage. If her father is involved in trying to screw you over financially, that's even better." I nodded. "And what about my business?" "That's the tricky part," Steve admitted. "If they come after it, we need to be ready. Start locking things down. Secure important accounts, back up everything. Don't make it obvious, but start protecting yourself." I left the office with a plan. They thought I was walking into this blind, but I was about to flip the script. After my meeting with Steve, I knew I had to be careful. Becky and her father were playing the long game, but now so was I. That night, I acted normal. I made dinner, we watched TV, and I even asked Becky about her day. She gave me vague answers, avoiding eye contact like she always did when she was lying. I wasn't going to confront her yet. No, I needed something solid. So, while Becky was in the shower, I did something I never thought I'd do. I went through her phone. The smoking gun. She had a password, but like always, she used something easy. Our dog's name, followed by her birth year. I typed it in. It unlocked. I went straight to her messages. Nothing suspicious under Greg's name, which meant one thing. She was hiding their conversations. Either she was using a different app or deleting texts. Then I checked her emails. And that's when I hit gold. A message from Greg Larson. Subject: keeping things quiet. Body: Becky, we need to be careful. Your dad wants everything to go smoothly. And if Tim gets suspicious, this could get messy. Make sure he doesn't fight the settlement. We'll take care of the business once the papers are signed. Call me when you can. I felt my blood boil. This wasn't just about Becky leaving me. They were planning to take my business too. I quickly forwarded the email to myself and deleted the sent message from her outbox. Then, just to be sure, I took photos of the email on my phone. When I heard the water shut off, I put her phone back exactly where I found it and walked out like nothing had happened. The realization. I barely slept that night. I kept replaying everything in my head. They weren't just trying to screw me over emotionally. This was financial warfare. Becky and her father had it all figured out. Becky gets me to agree to an easy divorce. I give up the house. I sign off on a fair settlement. And once it's done, they come after my business. They probably had some loophole lined up, some shady legal trick to take control of my contracts, my clients, everything I had worked for. And I bet Greg was already being positioned to take my place. I stared at the ceiling, my fists clenched. They wanted to destroy me, but they had no idea who they were messing with. The next move. The next morning, I called Steve. I found something, I told him. When I read him the email, he let out a low whistle. Tim, this changes everything. How so? This proves intent. If we can get more, we can make a case for fraud, maybe even conspiracy. But we need more than one email. We need more evidence. I nodded, already knowing what I had to do. I had to let Becky and her father think they were winning. I had to let them get comfortable. And then, I was going to bury them. I wasn't just angry anymore. I was laser-focused. If Becky and her father wanted to ruin me, they should have made sure I didn't catch on first. Because now I was going to make sure they paid for it. Locking down my business. The first thing I did was secure my company. My IT consulting firm wasn't just some side gig. It was my life's work. If Ronald Maines thought he could just snatch it out from under me, he had another thing coming. I met with my accountant and my second-in-command, David, the only employee I fully trusted. I need you to keep this between us, I told him. But there's a chance Becky's father is coming after the company. David frowned. What? Why would he? It's a long story, but trust me, he's got something planned. David nodded. All right, what do we do? I took a deep breath. First, we move company funds into a separate holding account. Just a temporary one, so if they try anything shady, they can't touch the main accounts. David grinned. You got it. Second, I continued, we revise all our contracts. Any clients tied to Becky's father's bank? We phase them out. We don't need them. David's eyes widened. Damn, you're going nuclear. They want to ruin me, David, I said flatly. I'm just making sure they don't get the chance. The affair? More proof. While David handled the business side, I went after the next piece of the puzzle. Becky's affair. I had proof that she was meeting Greg. I had proof that they were planning to screw me over financially. But I needed something undeniable. And then I got my break. Becky had a routine. Every Thursday, she had a yoga class after work. Except now I knew that was a lie. So that Thursday I followed her. She drove across town to a fancy apartment complex, the kind where rent cost more than most people's mortgage. She parked in the guest lot, stepped out of her car, and walked inside like she had been there 100 times before. I waited. 30 minutes passed. An hour. Then, just as I expected, Greg walked her out. She kissed him. Right there in the open. I took pictures. Multiple angles. Undeniable proof. And just like that, I had everything I needed. The calm before the storm. That night, Becky came home late, same as always. She kicked off her shoes, gave me a half-hearted smile, and muttered something about a long day. I just nodded, acting like I believed her. Oh, she added. I talked to my dad today. He wants us to finalize the settlement soon. I nearly laughed. Of course he did. Sounds good, I said, keeping my voice neutral. She smiled, relieved. She actually thought I was falling for it. And that's when I knew I had them right where I wanted them. The next step? I wasn't just going to stop the divorce from ruining me. I was going to turn this whole thing against them. Becky thought I was clueless. She thought she could take everything and walk away without a scratch. But now, I had proof. The affair, the setup, the financial scheme, and I was about to use it, testing the waters. The next morning, over coffee, I casually asked, So, how was yoga last night? Becky barely looked up from her phone. Good. Same as always. I smiled. That's great. You must really love it. She nodded, sipping her drink. No hesitation. No guilt. I could have called her out right then. Could have told her I knew she spent last night in Greg's arms instead of at yoga. But that would have been too easy. Instead, I just filed it away, knowing that soon, she was going to wish she had never lied to me. Becky was getting impatient. That evening, she brought up the divorce again. We should sign the settlement soon, she said casually. It'll be easier for both of us. Easier for her, she meant. I nodded. Yeah, I've been thinking about that. I want to go over the details one more time before we finalize. She smiled, relieved. She thought I was giving in. What she didn't know. While she thought I was reviewing the papers, Steve and I were drafting our own version of the agreement. One that protected my assets. One that gave me leverage. One that, when the time came, would destroy her plan. I just had to wait for the right moment to play my hand. Becky was too confident. Too relaxed. She thought everything was falling into place. And then she made a mistake. The late-night call. Around 11 p.m., Becky was in the kitchen, whispering on the phone. She thought I was asleep. I wasn't. I stood just outside the doorway listening. Yeah, he's not fighting it. No, he hasn't caught on. I know, Greg. Just trust me. Greg. She was so sure I was clueless that she didn't even bother hiding anymore. I smiled to myself. She had no idea what was coming. Becky thought she had me wrapped around her finger. She had no idea I was about to rip the rug out from under her. Sealing the deal. The next morning, I casually said, I'm ready to sign the settlement. Her eyes lit up. Really? Yeah, I said, keeping my tone neutral. Let's get it over with. She had no clue that I had swapped the papers with my own version, the one that would protect me and expose her once the truth came out. She thought she was winning, but in reality, she was walking straight into her own downfall. Becky wasted no time. She set up a meeting with our lawyers to sign the papers. I walked in calm, collected. She walked in smug, signing the trap. As she flipped through the paperwork, she barely read it. She just wanted my signature. This is the best for both of us, she said sweetly. I smiled. I couldn't agree more. Then we signed. She thought it was over. But in reality, the real fight was just beginning. 2 days later, Becky and her father sat across from me in a follow-up meeting. They were confident, arrogant. Ronald smirked. Glad you were reasonable about all this, Tim. I leaned back in my chair. Oh, I'm always reasonable. Then I pulled out the proof. The photos of Becky and Greg. The email about their plan. The fake settlement she signed, giving me full control of my business and assets. Becky's face drained of color. Ronald's smirk vanished. I folded my hands. Now, let's talk about how this divorce is really going to go. Becky's hands shook as she flipped through the documents. This isn't what we agreed on, she stammered. Ronald's face turned red. You little... He clenched his jaw, barely holding back his anger. I shrugged. You should have read before signing. Checkmate. Becky had given up any claim to my business. She had no rights to my assets. And now, I had proof of her affair. She looked at Greg, but he was already backing away. He knew he was screwed too. Ronald stood, fists clenched. You think this is over? I smiled. Oh, I know it is. Becky broke down first. Tears, shaking hands, the whole act. Tim, please, we can talk about this. I leaned back. Talk? Like how you and Greg talked at the hotel. She flinched. Greg stood up, already distancing himself. I didn't know. Ronald cut him off. Shut up, Greg. He turned to me, eyes cold. You think this makes you untouchable? I smirked. No. But it makes you powerless. For the first time in his life, Ronald Maines had no control. And I was going to enjoy watching him fall. Ronald stormed out first, his face like thunder. He hated losing. Greg followed, avoiding Becky's eyes. He was done with her. He wanted no part of the mess she created. And Becky? She just sat there, broken. Tim, I never meant for it to go this far. I stood up, grabbing my folder of evidence. Well, Becky, it did. She reached for my hand, but I pulled away. Enjoy your new life, I said. Oh, good luck finding a new job. I'm sure your dad won't be in the mood to help. Her face crumbled. I walked out. I didn't just survive their scheme. I destroyed them with it.
Bye.